Air India recently placed one of the biggest aircraft orders in commercial aviation history, expanding its future fleet to over 500 planes. A 2.5-decade transformation plan, billions of Tata money on the line. The official enemy was supposed to be Emirates, the Gulf carrier that has quietly siphoned off Indian international travelers for 20 years. But Emirates isn't the real threat. The airline that could quietly suffocate Air India before it ever reaches its potential is sitting right next door, flying out of the same Indian airports, and it doesn't even need a single wide-body to do it. For decades, the story of Indian aviation was simple. Air India was the flag carrier, bleeding money, owned by a government that treated it like a museum piece. Emirates, Etihad, and Qatar Airways quietly built empires by funneling Indian passengers through Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and Doha. By 2022, over 65% of India's international traffic flew on foreign carriers. Then Tata bought Air India back for around 18,000 crore rupees and the comeback story began. New livery, new orders, the merger with Vistara, a 5-year plan called Vihan AI. Everyone assumed the real fight was finally Air India versus Emirates for the long-haul crown. But while the cameras pointed at Dubai, a different airline was building a weapon that could break Air India before it ever takes off. To understand why IndiGo is so dangerous, you have to understand what IndiGo actually is. It was founded in 2006 by Rahul Bhatia and Rakesh Gangwal, two men obsessed with one idea: run a low-cost airline so brutally efficient that no competitor can survive on price. They picked one aircraft family, the Airbus A320. They picked one cabin class. They picked one operational model copied from Ryanair and Southwest, and they executed it with surgical discipline. By 2015, IndiGo had overtaken Jet Airways. By 2019, Jet Airways was bankrupt. By 2024, IndiGo controlled over 63% of India's domestic market. Air India and its subsidiaries combined sat at around 27%. Therefore, IndiGo wasn't just winning the domestic war, it had already won it. It carried roughly 100 million passengers a year. It operated over 400 aircraft. Its cost per available seat kilometre was around 3.5 cents, almost half of what Air India was running. Every time Air India tried to drop a fare to fight back, IndiGo could go lower and still make money. Every time Air India added a route, IndiGo was already flying it with younger planes and tighter turnarounds. But the truly terrifying part wasn't the market share, it was what IndiGo did next. Then, in June 2023, IndiGo dropped its own bomb: 500 Airbus A320 family aircraft, the largest single aircraft type order in commercial aviation history at the time, briefly eclipsing even Air India's headline-grabbing announcement. The industry stopped breathing. 500 narrow bodies meant IndiGo wasn't just defending its turf, it was preparing to flood it. But that order was just the warning shot. In April 2024, IndiGo did something no Indian low-cost carrier had ever done. It ordered 30 Airbus A350-900s, wide-body jets, long-haul jets, the exact category Air India had built its entire revival strategy around. Then it went further. IndiGo began utilizing leased wide-body aircraft to expand its footprint, funneling long-haul traffic into Europe on its own terms. No business class, no frills, just point-to-point Indian diaspora traffic at fares Air India simply could not match. Therefore, the question stopped being whether IndiGo could compete internationally. It became whether Air India could survive once IndiGo got serious. And then came the detail that should have set off alarms inside Tata headquarters. IndiGo's market capitalization crossed 2 lakh crore rupees in 2024. At certain points, IndiGo was worth more than Lufthansa, Air France KLM, and IAG, the parent of British Airways, combined. A single Indian low-cost carrier had become more valuable than 3 of Europe's flag carriers stacked together. But the threat isn't the order, it's the math. Here's what nobody at Air India wants to say out loud. Every passenger IndiGo carries domestically is a passenger that does not get fed into Air India's international network. Air India's entire wide-body strategy depends on connecting traffic. A passenger flies Patna to Delhi, then Delhi to London. That second leg is where the margin lives. But if that passenger flies IndiGo from Patna to Delhi because the fare is 30% cheaper, they will probably also fly IndiGo or Emirates on the international leg. Therefore, IndiGo doesn't need to beat Air India in the air over the Atlantic. It just needs to starve Air India of feed traffic on the ground in India, and it already is. IndiGo's domestic dominance means it controls the funnel. It controls which passengers walk through which terminal, which loyalty program they join, which app they open. Air India is trying to build a global airline on top of a domestic foundation that IndiGo already owns. That is the real fight, not Air India versus Emirates over Dubai. Air India versus IndiGo over Delhi, Mumbai, Bengaluru, and every Tier 2 city in between. But the deeper problem isn't even the feed traffic, it's something structural that Tata may not be able to fix no matter how much money it spends. Because while everyone watched the domestic war, IndiGo was building something else entirely, a cost structure that Air India physically cannot replicate. IndiGo built its foundation on a vastly simpler fleet. Air India, post-Vistara merger, operates Airbus A320s, A321s, A350s, Boeing 737s, 777s, and 787s, 6 different fleet types, 6 different pilot training pipelines, 6 different maintenance contracts, 6 different spare parts inventories. Therefore, Air India's complexity cost is baked in for the next decade. IndiGo's simplicity cost advantage compounds every single year. Then there's the workforce. Air India inherited tens of thousands of legacy employees from the government era, many on contracts and pension obligations that Tata is still untangling. IndiGo built its workforce from scratch, lean, performance-based, and roughly half the size per aircraft. Air India's unit costs are estimated at 5 to 6 cents per seat kilometer. IndiGo runs at around 3.5. That gap is not a marketing problem. That is not a livery problem. That is not a new business class seat problem. That is structural physics. You cannot outspend your way to a lower cost base. You have to rebuild the entire airline. And Tata is trying, but every quarter IndiGo adds more aircraft and widens the gap. Fresh out of fleet integration headaches, Air India is also facing customer complaints about old cabins, broken seats, and delayed refits on legacy wide bodies. The promised transformation is real, but it is slow, and IndiGo is not waiting. By 2030, the Indian aviation map will look unrecognizable. IndiGo is projected to operate over 600 aircraft. It will likely fly to 20+ international long-haul destinations. It will carry an estimated 150 million passengers a year. Air India, by then, will have absorbed Vistara completely, taken delivery of dozens of new wide bodies, and rebranded itself into something Tata can be proud of. But the question isn't whether Air India will be better. It will be. The question is whether better is enough. Because IndiGo isn't standing still. It is launching premium cabins on its A321XLRs. It is rumored to be exploring a frequent flyer program upgrade. It is opening international lounges. It is doing exactly what every low-cost carrier in history has done once it dominates its home market. It moves up the value chain. Therefore, the boutique advantage Air India was supposed to own, the full-service premium Indian carrier, is being attacked from below before Air India can even establish it. And the most uncomfortable detail of all, IndiGo's founders have already proven they can take down a premier legacy airline. They did it to Jet Airways. Jet Airways had legacy, premium brand, international routes, and decades of customer loyalty. None of it mattered. The math caught up. The only real question left is whether Tata's 18,000 crore rupees and 25-year vision can move faster than a competitor that has already won the ground war and is now coming for the sky. The Gulf carriers were never the real story. The real story is 2 Indian airlines, one rebuilding from the ashes of government neglect, the other built on a calculator and ruthless discipline. One of them will define what flying in India looks like for the next 50 years. Hey, before you go, check out another video here.